to arrive at God's existence. And so specifically, logic is a branch of philosophy, studies the argumentation and reason, and is closely related to epistemology, or the study of knowledge. So there's many logical proofs of God's existence, and this list that I'm going to send you is 20 of them. And you're welcome to examine those arguments, as you have time. But I think there's some really good ones in there, and you would be compelled through reason to believe that God exists. Now, there's one at the very end of the list called Pascal's wager. Anybody familiar with Pascal's wager? Anybody ever heard of Pascal's wager? Mm-hmm. Okay. So just briefly, Pascal's wager is an argument for God, but an argument for faith in God as a wager. And so what he was doing basically is he said, hey, let's suppose you use your reason to arrive at whether God exists or not, and you're not convinced through logic and reason that God exists. What would be your alternative? How could you approach the question? Because remember, I said, does God exist is the question everybody's got to answer. And if you're stuck, how could you approach it? So, as initially proposed by Pascal, the wager assumes that logical reasoning alone cannot describe for or against the existence of God. He's just accepting that possibility that somebody could hear all these arguments and still not know. So, because there's, maybe they see there's good reasons either way, that he exists or he doesn't exist. So since you can't decide for sure, then, since it's an important question to answer, he said, well, where will you place your bet? If you had to wager, if you had to bet. And so here's kind of where he went with this. And this, again, is not an argument for the existence of God. It's an argument for why you should believe in God. So if you place it with God, you lose nothing, even if it turns out that God does not exist. But if you place it against God and you are wrong and God does exist, you lose everything. God, eternity, heaven, infinite gain. Let us assess the two cases. If you win everything. If you lose everything. Or you lose nothing, rather. So his argument was just simple. It's just better to bet on the existence of God than to not bet on it, if you're a betting person. So I just thought it was kind of an ingenious way of approaching the problem. But so it's not a proof. It's more of a, if you had to bet, where would you place your bet? Now, a couple of expectations before we proceed any further in terms of what we could actually accomplish today. Humility is actually very essential here because we're speaking about the Holy Trinity, and it's the very life and being of God himself. And I'll do my best to help you understand the Catholic teaching in this regard, but it will be impossible, and I mean impossible, for me to explain the Trinity to you. If I could understand God, he wouldn't be God. My puny little brain is not up to it. And so just expect that, I can't explain the Trinity because it's beyond our human ability to understand. Now, that doesn't mean we don't understand some things. And so that's what we'll be focusing on, the things we do know. So start out really basic. The word Trinity is simply a contraction of two words. Tri, meaning three, and unity, meaning one. That's all it is. And the term was coined, probably around 2nd or 3rd century to express this idea of three in one that we now think of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, how many of you know or heard of Bishop Fulton J. Sheen. Anybody? Okay. So he has an interesting story that he related. And he said, I remember spending an hour describing the Trinity with analogies to someone taking instructions. And I insisted it was a mystery. When I finished, the good lady said, at the beginning you said this was a mystery. It's no longer a mystery to me. You made it perfectly clear. Well, I said, Madam, if I made it perfectly clear to you, I did not explain it right. It should be a mystery. So, and then there was an additional note on it. It said, the problem with using analogies to explain the Trinity is that God is the most unique being. Many theologians will tell you that it is not quite correct to call God a being, but rather that he is the being or the reason anything exists. Because God is unique, any analogy we use will inevitably fall short. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says that God transcends all creatures. Our human words always fall short of the mystery of God. That's why I said, there's no way I'm going to be able to explain the Trinity to you. I can't. It's impossible. Now, I've got a brief video here by Dr. Brant Petrie, and he's going to talk about the Trinity as a mystery. And we'll let him speak to us for a few minutes here.
Solemnity of the most holy Trinity. And yet, at the same time that I say that, I also can imagine that this might be one of the most dreaded Sundays for preachers because we come up against this great mystery of God, the one God in three divine persons. And so one of the things that priests and deacons have told me is that this is a tough Sunday to preach, especially since when you look at the actual readings that are chosen for Trinity Sunday, it's not always at first immediately apparent why these readings were selected and how to draw out the teaching of the church on the Trinity from these particular readings. So this video, what I'm going to try to do is especially give some help to anyone out there who's having to preach on the mystery of the Trinity, because it is daunting.
Because this is a great mystery. I want to begin our reflection on this Sunday, first, not with the readings themselves, but with a paragraph from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. There's a beautiful section on the Trinity in the Catechism, which gives you a kind of summary of the Church's teaching on this mystery. It's paragraphs 232 to 260. And there's one paragraph in particular that stands out for me, and it is Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 234. And this is what it says about the mystery of the Trinity. Quote, the mystery of the Most Holy Trinity is the central mystery of Christian faith and life. It is the mystery of God in Himself. It is therefore the source of all the other mysteries of faith, the light that enlightens them. It is the most fundamental and essential teaching in the hierarchy of the truths of faith. End quote. Now, that is a really strong statement. I know before I started to study theology, if you'd have asked me, what is the central mystery of the Christian faith? I probably would have said, well, it's the Eucharist, the source and summit of the Christian life. Or maybe I would have said, it's the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Or maybe even His atonement on the cross or something like that. But that's not what the Church teaches. The Church teaches that the Trinity is the central mystery, that the mystery of God in Himself, one God, three persons, is the central mystery of the Christian faith. And yet, for many of us, when we come up against the Trinity, we don't know what to do with it, right? For some people, they almost treat it as if it's a kind of like a math problem, like 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. Or you hear different analogies used, like the clover or whatever. These analogies that actually can be sometimes misleading, trying to explain the mystery of the Trinity. And yet the Catechism's right here, and you can see this even if you just look at our life, our devotional life as Catholics. Think about it for a second. The beginning of our life as a Christian is us being baptized in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, right? And every time we enter a church, we dip our fingers into the water and we make the sign, we call it the sign of the cross, but it's also the sign of the Trinity, right? It's in the name of the Father,